It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Hello and welcome to the first of the March programmes of Learning Now Television. Nigel, who's on the show?
Great show, Kate, great show. We've got Peter Shepherd talking about Time to Learn TV, based very loosely on LNTV. Certainly I think we were the inspiration. And it's a company-wide TV programme going out once every few months, helping staff share some of the great success stories that collaboration and social learning are engendering in Ericsson. And it's really well put together. There's a little excerpt on the show which I think you'll be very impressed by. So all credit to Peter Shepherd for that. Secondly, we've got David Kelly, who's the Executive Director of the Learning Guild. And David is talking about their Learning Leaders Forum, which is an attempt to give support, stimulation and ideas to learning leaders all over the world. It's not just US based, it's an international forum. And if anyone wants further information about that, there will be a crawl on the screen. I wish we had something as good, professional and as comprehensive as that in the UK. But David is talking about a really interesting new initiative. And Martin Cousins launches yet another really interesting research report, plus our regular Robin Hall is going on about the perils of diversity training, or the perils of sensitizing people to bias and discrimination. Really good stuff, and as usual, quite provocative. Anything else to mention, Kate? Given that it's International Women's Day very soon, what have you got to tell us about that?
Well, you eagle-eyed viewers will note that we don't have any female interviewees on this week's programme in the week of International Women's Day. Obviously, we are still doing the best we can at the backdrop of the pandemic, and people's diaries and things like that might maybe get in the way. But I'm delighted to share that David Kelly, who you spoke to in preparation for the show, has commissioned Dr. Jane Bozarth Guild and myself to work on a really great new research report, really getting under the skin of some amazing, incredible and inspiring women in learning. And we'll be sharing the overview of that with Jane on the show later this month.
I'll be looking forward to that. Well done. Excellent thing to do, Kate. So, everybody, enjoy the rest of the show. Welcome back, Peter Shepherd. It's very nice to see you again and get you back on Learning Now Television. And Peter works for Ericsson, the 5G people. And Peter is the global head of learning ecosystems. And that has to be the best job title that I've come across for a long, long time. So Peter, it's really good to have you back on. And what we want to talk to you about today is Time to Learn TV, because you've set up an initiative which I think is absolutely brilliant, and I would love you to talk about it in a little bit more detail and explain where it fits in the learning ecosystem of which you are head.
Okay, thanks, Nigel, and it is a pleasure to be on this again. Where this all started was a year or so ago, where we had the way we used to do Time to Learn, as we call it, which is an event, which then was an event for all of our people in Ericsson, all 100,000 people plus, was to have an internal virtual conference. Now, I know there are almost a plethora at the moment of virtual conferences. So we thought, actually, time to rethink this. And one of the reasons for rethinking was that we also noticed that people just don't have the time for a big, long virtual conference. And what we wanted to do was to ensure that what we did around Time to Learn actually offered people not just to push learning as the value of learning across the organization, but to also give people micro-learning opportunities. So this is more, if you like, than just a marketing initiative. What we really wanted to get from this was it was a combination of, yes, establishing the value of learning, but secondly, to also give people very short insights into key critical topics in learning. And so what we came up with was very simply a TV show.
Just explain a little bit more in terms of when did you launch it, and what is the quantum? How many people have actually made use of Time to Learn TV since it was launched? And is it a regular weekly, monthly show, an occasional thing? Does it go out on the internet? How do you actually manage that process?
Okay, so in terms of the cadence and when it went out, we launched it last month, so in January. So we thought it was a great way of starting off the new year. The cadence is that we plan to do it once every 6 months. Now that may sound like but it takes quite a lot of effort to pull this together. So we decided in the end, initially we thought we'll do it once a quarter. But then when we looked at the effort required, then we decided to go once every 6 months. And where we approached it as well was that we wanted to ensure that this really felt like a global initiative. It didn't feel like this is Sweden calling or this is coming out from a particular part of the organization. So we decided to have each of the shows based in each of the main time zones. So, we have one for Europe or for EMEA, one for Americas and one for Asia Pac. And that solved another issue for us, which is when you're playing out these programs, all the time zone issues come into play. So we play it out at 12 o'clock local time from either from India, Sweden, or Dallas, in fact, and that really worked for us in terms of giving people access to it. And as a result, I think we got we've had now, I think it's over 11,000 people that have tuned in to Time to Learn TV. So just like Netflix, you can watch it when we play it out at the specific time, or you can watch the recording. And the idea is that you can access season 1 and season 2 and so on.
Yeah, that sounds to me like a huge success. So you're reaching 10% of your global workforce with your first go. This isn't like it's been going for 5 years. So you can build on that. And if that 10%, next one will be 15% and so on. You're going to hit a lot of people and you're going to get your message across. So it's both useful in terms of the skill information component, but useful in terms of making learning appear to be okay, sexy, interesting, part of work and part of the workflow. Is that the aim?
Yeah, and I think part of making it sexy, part of making it getting that attraction is that you are identifying topics that are of really critical importance. So, what did we kick off with? We kicked off with 5G, of course, as you'd expect in Ericsson.
Of course.
So, the title of our first show was You, Me and 5G. The second one was focused around data and what it could do for individuals in Ericsson. And data is a big area, a big skill that really matters to us in Ericsson. Yes. And the third one, we really wanted to focus on a power skill. So we picked storytelling, which is becoming of increasing importance. And one of the reasons was that was played out of the US, and the US have really focused on storytelling, right up to the leadership team in the US, who've really taken it to and implemented it and made it relevant across the whole of that particular market area.
So that's your covering the world. So you had 5G, data, and storytelling, each majored in one of your geographical areas. Is that the idea?
Yeah, exactly. So we have You, Me, and 5G kicking off, and that was played out and featured a lot of people around Europe, and was played out there. But that, I think, is another important part of this, which is what we aim to do is to not just use external experts, such as yourself, Nigel, but we're also wanting to use people across Ericsson. So it's a way of leveraging our experts and the knowledge that's inside Ericsson and sharing it around the world.
Yeah, that's very important, very, very important. So you build a kind of network of knowledge around the place, and to me, that if people perceive the value of sharing because they get some kind of acknowledgement and kudos from sharing, you're much more likely to share. If it's seen as something you have to do in addition to, there's much more reluctance. So you're trying to create that kind of learning culture in the organization, and using TV, using video as a medium for delivering that kind of simple but powerful message. Would you agree?
Yeah, and we want people to step forward and tell their stories, because people can learn from those stories. So we kicked off with the first program where we had one of our field service engineers who shared a lot of their stories around what 5G is to that person, and also correct some of the myths around 5G that exist. That is getting that personal touch and getting people to share their knowledge is a really key aspect, and actually has always been a theme around what we were trying to do with Time to Learn. But with the TV show, I think it's been perhaps more successful.
Yeah, you're humanizing abstract things. You're giving a real face and a real name and a real person that people can identify with, and that seems to me to be an absolutely critical message and very, very useful, particularly in a technology company, which is all about bits and bytes. You're actually turning it into, it's all about people and the contribution that people make.
Yeah, and people get engaged with what around people's individual stories.
Yeah. And exactly, I was just going to say around stories. The US has got it spot on. They do get engaged around stories. That's fantastic. Yeah. Peter, thanks so much for sharing that with us. I think this is a great opportunity for everyone watching us. It's their time to learn, and time to learn from you talking about Time to Learn TV. And so few organizations recognize the power of individual stories owned by their own people. So thank you for sharing with us, and the very best. I hope it's a spectacular success going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. And we will let you know how Time to Learn TV Season 2 goes. One of the things I perhaps just finish with is that one of the responses I've seen today actually around COVID and all the impact of COVID is that there are, I think there's a survey done by Microsoft that 30% of people are feeling burnout through this kind of virtual environment that we're in. That makes having learning bites, having smaller parts of learning even more important. Yeah. And which is where I think kind of the idea of having TV shows kind of crosses over between having great marketing, but also having great micro learning that people can really engage with. Yeah. And I think for us, that's really what we've enjoyed and what we like about the TV show concept.
Yeah. So the medium is the message, in fact. Peter, thank
Indeed.
you so much. Thank you so much indeed for talking to me today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see, this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite, you just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question. You might want to answer this later.
You see, I love this.
Next up, regular contributor Robin Hoyle tackles an issue close to my heart. He looks at why unconscious bias training is not working and it is not leading to a more diverse workforce. Check it out.
Over the last couple of weeks, learning and development made the news headlines. I know, who knew? And the issue was a chap called Bill Michael. Many of us would not have heard of him. He is the UK chairperson of KPMG. I'm using the term chairperson mostly to wind him up. I'm sure that will completely annoy him. Anyway, he stood down. He stood down after describing unconscious bias training as quote-unquote crap, and saying that behaviours never changed despite the fact that they've put on lots of unconscious bias training courses for staff and behaviour hasn't changed. Who knew? Who knew that putting on a short course which is primarily a bunch of people in a room looking at PowerPoint slides doesn't change behaviour? Now, I want to be very, very clear here that I am not in any way talking about whether or not unconscious bias is a thing. It is. Get over it. People are unconsciously biased. Not only that, I believe white privilege is a thing and that we have to address it within organisations. And as the US, my US colleagues would describe me as a bleeding heart liberal, as a white, able-bodied, heterosexual male, I appreciate that I am extraordinarily privileged, and I recognise that it is something that we have to do something about. So I'm not talking about unconscious bias as being the issue, which is what Bill Michael said it was. That it's not a thing, that it's crap, that we don't need to do anything about it. I'm talking about the fact that the solution that KPMG and many other organisations have chosen was frankly never going to work. The idea that we're going to address years of attitudes and values and ways of perceiving the world and the people in it by putting people in a room over their lunchtime, giving them a few sandwiches and walking them through some PowerPoints to say, oh, did you realise that people who are gay or disabled or black or from an ethnic minority might have some issues within the workplace? I mean, honestly, that's the best solution we could come up with. The reality is that unconscious bias training, when it's set up in ways like that, is never going to be effective. It's never going to work. And what bothers me about the fact that an organisation like KPMG should be led by somebody who thinks that way is that KPMG and all the other major professional services firms advise UK chief executives on their training and organisational development strategies. They talk to them about how to develop their people, and yet when we look at what they are doing, they are using outdated, ineffective, one-size-fits-all tick box compliance trainings for something which is of monumental importance within organisations at the moment. So, no surprise, Bill, unconscious bias training doesn't work if the only process that you're going to get involved in is to put people in a classroom for a bit of time and talk at them. Who knew, frankly? Do you know what really deals with unconscious bias within organisations? I'm afraid it's ensuring they're not led by people like Bill Michael.
Our learning experiences unlock potential transform the performance of people and organisations, and help millions around the world build happy and successful careers. We change lives with evidence-based learning that works, sparking real change for real impact.
Next up on Learning Now Television is a face you've seen before and a face that you haven't. Danny Seals you've seen on Learning Now TV in the past, and Sam Davis have formed a new company called Vendorly. But what is this company? What are they doing? Are they a vendor? Are they a provider? What are they doing? So they come on to talk to us about it today. So welcome, guys. Can you tell us what you're doing?
I've not been on Learning Now TV mainly because my background isn't L&D and talent and that kind of thing, but an experience I had in the past bringing on a vendor into the company I was working for probably a few years ago now, found it was so difficult and it really struck me how much of a minefield it was to seek out and find the right people. Now, luckily I knew Danny, so that was very helpful. But nobody knows every vendor and nobody has time to look at every vendor. So inevitably, there's lots of people that are getting missed. And there's a big risk that clients aren't finding the best vendor for them and vendors are missing potential clients. So through speaking to Danny, and he guided me through that kind of experience, but discussing it further with him, the idea came up of kind of amplifying the voice of the clients that vendors have already had and creating a platform that is kind of open and honest and trusted, and sharing data and market intelligence for the benefit of the whole market. And that's kind of, in a nutshell for me anyway, where Vendorly was born.
So for me, it started around about 2016. So I've been a vendor and I've also been a head of L&D. And I've always been kind of looking for potential vendors or LXPs or MSs, all that good stuff. And I did what everyone else kind of does, right? You go and ask the friends, actually, this is my challenge, who do you think I should go out to? And I've been burnt in the past because I've listened to someone and it hit me quite quick, really, is ultimately what we're doing is we're just taking somebody else's word for it. And often that isn't the perfect vendor for the challenge, what's at hand. I mean, obviously by that time it's too late, right? I've already signed a contract. I've already gone, yeah, these are the vendors. And often it's the shyer voice. It's the voice that doesn't have lots and lots of marketing. What can often be the right person for your challenge at that time. Now, what I later realized later on down the line is when you do select a vendor and when someone does say, hey, go with this person, there's always kind of this weird middleman in the middle who either takes a cut, gets a bit of a backhand, and just it kind of hit me. It was a bit shady. And ultimately, these marketplaces, these places where you can review people exist in our consumer grade life, right? Like we see them in Airbnb, we see them in Trustpilot. And it just made sense to me that actually this just needs to be created in what we do. So
what is it? Is it a platform? Is it like a marketplace? How does it work?
So taking what Danny said there, Vendorly is VENN. You know, it's everyone's familiar with the Venn diagram, and that's all about kind of that happy point where several things dovetail together. And in this case, that's the vendors and the buyers. And we're here to provide that kind of sweet spot where the two meet and go through and fix some of those issues that Danny's mentioned there, and create this platform and create this space where we're hands off and it avoids any bias or interference that can occur through other methods of finding the right vendor, and provides that space where the voice of the client can really be amplified so that they can sort of vouch for essentially whether or not this vendor's provided for them or not. And we believe that, past and recent performance of a vendor is a very good indication of what they're going to be like for you in the future. So it's a case of bringing that to the fore.
So if Jill, I always have this, fictional Jill character in my head. She's a busy head of L&D and she's looking for a new vendor and she's maybe got a short list, she maybe hasn't. She might look at something like the Fosway 9 grid and kind of goes, all right, these look interesting. And then she can come on to Vendorly and see reviews of people who are actually using that platform already. Is that right?
So for us, it's just exactly that. It's that one-stop shop where you go to find out a true unbiased opinion of that whole end-to-end experience. And obviously, what we really liked about Vendor was, you know, for the fact that people who are coming to Vendor are people who's actively looking. Often what we heard because when we created this, we went to the key kind of demographics, right? We had the vendors and then we had the clients, and we asked them, what is it you want? What's your pain points? And time again, it was, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to kind of market myself, to shout out how good I am because I'm too busy doing work. And clients was like, actually, I don't have time either. And actually, I just want to go somewhere where I know I can get an unbiased opinion quite quick and base it upon, like Sam said, history, like how well they've done in the past. So that's it. It's like that one-stop shop, I guess, for us.
I mean, it's so interesting because I think for me, it's that next level of detail, because we at Fosway, we do look at the customer advocacy. That's massive. And you might get different ratings around implementation versus business as usual versus support, you know, all of these things. We've all heard these stories of people that sign up for a contract and then they find out the support hours are really weird and don't suit them, or stupid things like that. But it's not just platforms, is it? It's broader than that.
Yeah, it's much broader than that. So, and I think you can see that in our pricing. So you've got your solo, your one-man band, then you've got your team, and then you've got your large enterprise and your technology. And what you'll probably see in our pricing is it's completely fair. The person who's a one-man band gets exactly the same benefits as the big enterprise on a paid plan, but it's just that they're charged in comparison to what, you know, their size of their organization, ultimately in the business.
And to be clear, you're charging the vendors, Sam, but not the buyers. Is that right?
Yeah.
So if I'm Jill, the L&D manager, I can just go on and look at this stuff for free, right? Is that right?
Yeah. So Jill, the L&D manager, is already probably going to spend at the end of this, so she doesn't want to spend at the start of it as well. So it's free for for clients to come and have a look, and buyers to come and have a look at all the different vendors and sort of find people that are right for them. But the vendor side is where the payment can be taken in order to sort of access the different services we provide. One thing we're very keen to do, and Danny, is be fair to all different company sizes, so everyone can be part of the club kind of thing, everyone can play. And we do actually provide a free profile that vendors can have, because we do want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to be seen and everyone gets a chance to sort of shine, and it isn't just a case of the person with the biggest wallet gets to the top of the list kind of thing.
So it's not a case then that vendors will be able to kind of buy a better spot?
Yeah, that's one thing we've been keen to avoid right from the get-go. We don't just want big budget wins. We want everyone and the best, because the best isn't always the biggest, and the best isn't always the vendor with the deepest pockets. In the particular instances of each different situation, is going to be different size or different type of vendor that will be the best for you. And we don't necessarily think that budget is the first thing that should come into it. So we want to make sure that where you do search for vendors, the results are purely based on the skills that vendor has, for one, but then secondly, how their clients, current and former, are rating them. And you can't pay to get to the top of our list. You literally get there by being the best at what you do and getting good reviews.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of when we designed this, we built it around 3 key words: open, honest, and impartial. And it has to be that. It has to be that. And that's kind of the reason why we're charging vendors, is for that reason, because then we don't have to rely on sponsorship. Mm-hmm. We don't have to rely on anything like that. It's literally, this is how this platform makes money, and it's that simple. I guess, you know, we haven't even talked about kind of the stuff in the back end, the evaluations, the sentiment analysis and stuff. But ultimately, you know, that is the only way to do it.
So thank you for sharing with us, and you know, you'll have to come back on and tell us all about how it's going.
Love to.
Yeah, love to. Cheers, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
We've also got another research report from Martin Cousins, and he's looking at the Edelman trust report, so that this report looks at the state of trust across various dimensions of our society, various categories across our society. We've done this report before, and this one from 220/221 is extremely interesting. Enjoy that. Welcome to the second research report of 2021. And this time, Martin has chosen the Edelman Trust Barometer 2021. And 33,000 people responded. And I'll give you a clue about what it focuses on. The cover has about 8 photographs. One is a lorry queue going all the way down a motorway as far as you can see. Another one has a Pfizer jab and a Pfizer logo. Another has posters of George Floyd and a huge crowd. Yet another has a group of Trump supporters outside the Capitol in Washington. And then there's a graph about the kind of catastrophic decline of various developed economies. So the context is very, very clear. What else attracted you to this report, Martin?
Well, Nigel, I think that trust is a massive issue that interests organisations, and to some extent it interests learning and development, and anyone involved in the workforce more generally. How could it not? You know, I think trust is a huge, huge factor in how organisations successfully operate or not. And this piece of research is 21 years old. It's massive, it's global. It asks 33,000 people from around the world to input their thoughts on trust. And it looks at what trust means across some of the bigger institutions in society. So it's got quite a broad scope. Don't let that put you off, because this is a really hot topic now. So, you know, no one can be operating without being concerned about job losses, climate change, the political environment around the world, COVID. You know, these are all massive, massive concerns, and they all impact on how we trust organisations and governments and NGOs and so on. So,
Martin, what it says is that there's less trust in government, less trust in media, less trust in NGOs, but business is more trusted than government in 18 out of 27 of the countries surveyed. That is quite extraordinary, isn't it? That we're centering on business to look for meaning, well-being, and objective information.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so it's true, and that's why you need to look at this, really, is because it's a big issue. It's a broad scope for the research, but it has a lot to say about the role of the organisation in people's lives. And I think that's why people need to look at it. So the biggest fears for people are around job loss, climate change, COVID. You know, so when job loss is a massive, massive issue and fear for people, it's going to relate to employers. It's really interesting that over the years, businesses have actually fared quite well in this report. They are seen as trustworthy where governments aren't, as you've just said. And I think that's something that we can then unpick when you go through this research. It's like, well, what does that mean? And not only what does it mean, but what responsibility do we have as businesses to help people feel that they can trust what is going on? Now, that one reason that people trust employers is because they're local. You know, it's basically people are more trusting right now of people in their community, the people that employ them locally, and people like scientists, which is no surprise, I don't think. They're far less trusting of governments and the media, actually. And
what's remote from them and what appears to be doing things to them rather than with them.
Yeah.
That seems to be the crux of it. Yes, you're absolutely right.
But I think I think it's interesting that people are now expecting businesses to be talking more publicly about things like the impact of the pandemic, job automation, and societal and local community issues. That's what's happening. So when you look inside the organisation, say as a learning or HR professional, then what does all that mean? How people are relating to you as an organisation in terms of the trust that you engender in them, and the opportunity that you have to actually, really support them and the community. And I think, so there's a growing expectation. This trust is a good thing in organisations, but then you've got a growing expectation around that. And those expectations include information quality. There's a massive theme in this report, which is all about the infodemic and also misinformation. It's a huge issue, but organisations come out really well. People actually trust the information that comes from their employer more than they do the media and governments, right? So that's a challenge now, because organisations need to keep going on that.
What the report seems to be indicating is that only 26% of people have good information hygiene. And what that means is that in information sense, it's like the vast majority of the population are walking around with filthy hands in a pandemic, embracing everyone, shaking hands at random and touching everything that they can find. And that is not a good idea. And what they're saying is that we need to learn better information hygiene, not just because of the pandemic, but just because of our overall well-being. And it's one way to rebuild trust in our institutions and in our media sources, because we've become more critical and more aware of what's right and what isn't right.
Yeah, I think that, it kind of talks to that idea of digital literacy and the skills that are required in organisations now. I think this is a massive area that I'm not sure employers have got a good handle on. We've had plenty of years to develop these skills, but why is this such an issue now? Why is misinformation so prevalent? Why are people not able to discern something that is factually correct from something that isn't?
It's quite true.
These are very real issues right now.
Yeah.
And, it's a health pandemic and we've got loads of misinformation around that, which isn't going to help the pandemic at all.
And in fact, the information pandemic has actually fueled the health pandemic, or the problems with the health pandemic, and the health pandemic has fueled the possibility of misinformation. What it says is that out of the bits of information or sources of information that people distrust, the lowest one is their social media. So they trust their social media more than the news, more than newspapers, more than experts, more than government. And that is extremely worrying. And what is also interesting is that the vast majority of people expect CEOs to have an opinion on the local community issues, societal issues, job issues, pandemic impact. And yet most CEOs, I would think, feel that isn't really their domain to speak in. So people are expecting, in the vacuum, it's the CEOs who should speak out and step into the void and start having opinions on things which traditionally, nothing to do with me. I'm focusing on making my company profitable. Not any longer, you're not.
Yeah, but I think also that reflects on the organisation as a whole. How good is the information literacy? How good a quality is the information that's being shared, that's being created? And this is a learning issue, because learning is one of its foundations seems to be content. How good is that?
I agree with you. I agree with you.
That's a genuine question. And I'm asking it because there's so much other content out there which is fueling, the whole misinformation crisis. So therefore, we can't assume that the stuff that we're working on and working with is, not immune to having something in it that might not be correct, or be based on a myth, or be based on unfounded or a complete lack of evidence, for example.
Yes, you're quite right. But it's not all just these are the problems. That if at the end of the report they start looking at those factors which are calculated to increase trust in business. And if I were in learning in an organization, I would look at those 16 factors and say, how many of those are in my domain, and I could make a difference by helping to maximize those and minimize the opposite. And they range from meeting your over expectations of how you should be responding to a pandemic, down to embracing sustainable practices across the business. So all of these things are likely to increase trust. And that seems to me kind of right into the domain of the learning leader at the moment. And that isn't generally understood, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, I think you're right to highlight that list of 16 factors. It's really, if nothing else, go to that page in the report and look at what you can be doing, because this is more than learning programs. This is far more fundamental than that, and I think it's a real opportunity to elevate what learning does. When it's starting to talk about what it does in these terms, then I think actually you're really talking in a completely different way, and one that really will resonate across the organisation, because people do care about this. This is what the research says. You're playing your part in building that trust.
Completely agree with you, Martin. Martin, we've got a crawl on the screen so that if anyone wants to download this report, it's entirely free and it is an enormous amount of work. I would hope that you would read this report and pick on the bits that you think are interesting and maybe keep circulating those and get some discussion going. So this is the 2021 Trust Barometer, which this year Edelman define. They name each year. And last year was trust, competence and ethics. Today, this year, declaring information bankruptcy. That says it all. Martin, thank you so much for drawing our attention to that. It's a delight to be able to introduce today David Kelly. He's the Executive Director of the Learning Guild. It's based in the US, but I think it's got a huge amount to offer people in learning all around the world. And I really want to spend a few minutes just celebrating what the e-learning guild has done and what it offers. And the great thing about it is, if you want to become a member, the fee is extortionate. It's exactly nothing. No dollars, no cents. And you get access to all of their research and all of their resources. So David, tell us a little bit about the Learning Guild. What is its aspiration and how does it deliver on that aspiration?
Sure, and thanks so much for having me. The Learning Guild has been around 20 years, a little over 20 years. And we are a professional development community of practice. We came about, David Holcomb and Heidi Fisk years and years ago noticed that there was a hole in the market of profession, saw the way technology was transforming the way that learning and development is done. It was influencing it in many ways, and there was a hole in there. And they decided to create, at that time it was called the e-learning guild, to fill that hole. And over the years, we have emerged as one of the primary communities of practice for people who are working at that intersection of learning and technology. Our focus has expanded over the years as the definition of e-learning has expanded. Last year, we rebranded Learning Guild to reflect that expanded focus and to reflect the fact that there's really not a difference between those two worlds that kind of just merge together these days. But what we do through a number of different types of media, we have a magazine, we do articles through our magazine, we publish a number of different publications as well as the research reports that you mentioned, and we host a number of different events online and in person through our events. Some of the ones that are in the US, DevLearn, Learning Solutions. Last year we started taking on management of the Learning 2020 show. Do a number of those events, as well as a host of online events that we do throughout the year. All built together to do what the guiding vision of what we do. The main vision of what we do is that we really feel together we are better, and we look for, through all the different media that we create, finding ways to bring the community together to help those who know share what they know with those who want to know, and ideally it helps push the entire industry forward.
Yeah, let's focus on a few of those individually. The first one is the quality of the research that you undertake. Jane Bozarth is the head of research, and it's like she was made to do that job for a whole life, and she's only done it for the last few years, but she's been building up to that point. She's an exceptionally competent researcher with a doctorate, and the quality of research, it's real literature reviews, so that if you want to understand a particular topic, and all of the research reports are free, then go there as a starting place. You know, I read every research report as it comes out, and I think they're very high quality and very, very useful. So if you are interested in a domain, at least use the Learning Guild research reports as a start. They're not all written by Jane, but she coordinates a raft of research. And you have practically one research report coming out a month, is that right?
Yeah, that is generally what we do. We contribute one a month. They are part of our free membership, free membership value proposition. In order to join the Learning Guild, it is completely free. Our events and such have costs to them, but our membership is completely free to be a member of the Guild, and research is one of the deliverables there. I was very fortunate a couple of years ago when Jane Bozarth, as you mentioned, she does a great job for us. She worked for State of North Carolina for a number of years, and when she was retiring from there, had a conversation of just how retired are you going to be, Jane? And she was interested in the opportunity. One of the things I love about Jane and the approach that she has for research is it's extremely practical. I mean, that's one of the reasons that it works really, really well for us. Jane has been in the trenches. Jane knows what works. She doesn't just focus on the theory. She focuses on how to put it into practice. And I think that shows in the research reports that she does.
Yeah, it's evidence-based, but it's not just the evidence. It's the evidence plus the conclusions and where to go next. So the last one I read, I don't know whether it was the last one that was published, is Growing as a Learning Leader. Mm-hmm. And again, I found that an extremely helpful report. They're all relatively short, 15 pages or 20 pages, all in the same kind of style. They have a very structured research approach, and go for them. They're very, very helpful. And it's not just those research reports. You also do case studies, which are extremely useful. You share your presentations that have been made, you know, in various ways around the world. You run webinars, and you generally engage your membership. So I think part of your role is to share what you think is pretty fine going on out there, good practice out there. And part of it is to bring the entire learning community, you know, raise the level of the entire learning community. Are they fair statements?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we, and I appreciate I find that description very complimentary, so I thank you for it. One of the things we have been very conscious of in our efforts of how we program things is our team of people who work on our conferences, who work on our magazine, who work on our research. They come from the field. They love it. They've been in the field. They've worked in the field. They know the world of the L&D professional, and they look to develop resources for it. We tend to balance the content that we do two ways. One is listening to the community, understanding what the desires are, and putting resources in play to address what the community is looking for. And then there's also the way that we're all passionate about this industry. We are L&D professionals first and foremost, and we are passionate about the work that we do. And we're following the industry, looking for the trends, looking for the opportunities to, in our own way, through our own curation, push the envelope a little bit further. You see that a lot at our sessions. We deliver what people are looking for, but we also try to deliver something a little outside the comfort zone of what people are looking for, that helps them stretch a little bit more, that helps the industry move a little bit further. And that's always through that lens. That's the lens that we've always looked through all the content that we generate.
Yeah, I'd like to finally focus on the Learning Leaders Alliance. This is brand new. This is a new initiative launched late last year, and it's really just about to move into top gear. Now, tell us about the Learning Leaders Alliance. This is a subscription service, so you join a community and you pay for that. But tell us, your subtitle is Talented Leaders Exploring Today's Challenges. But explain a little bit more about the logic behind that and what you hope it will achieve.
Sure. So and that's a good example of what I was just referring to, is it's kind of these two elements. On the one side, we do have it is a response to a desire from the community of something a little bit more in this space, and a little bit more that is addressing the needs of today's learning leaders. But on the other side, we wanted to do something a little unique, a little bit different. There are a lot of resources that are out there that are available that you can use, valuable resources that you can use to help do the role of a senior learning leader. There's lots of resources that are out there, and we'll support that need as well. But one of the things I think we're doing a little bit differently is we wanted to focus not so much on the roles of learning leaders. A lot of the discussions that are out there on learning leadership, they focus on the role that you're in, or the position that you're in, or these traits that all leaders have, and that's valuable. But what I think is making the lens through which what we are doing with this community a little different is we're focusing more on the behaviors. Regardless of the role that you're in, anybody can be a learning leader. Everyone in their role should approach it as a leader. And what does that mean? We talk about the need for empathy. What does empathy look like as a practice? The accountability of being a learning leader, or strategic thinking, what do those look like as a practice? And that's kind of the lens that we're looking at it as a community of practice, that we are going to bring people together that can share how to do these things, to share the proven practices of, hey, I'm a leader in my organization. These are things that I did. I'm going to share it with you so that you can adapt it to your own practice. That's how we're kind of looking through this lens. And we're looking to really invest a lot of resources into this. We've got monthly meetings that this group participates in. We bring in a leader, an industry leader every single month to have a discussion with these people. We have online forums like our first one that we're doing in February. A lot of resources being allocated to support the needs of this audience. We've been talking about doing this for a while, but I think what really triggered it was the experience that we're all going through in the pandemic, the need for all of us to connect in a different way and to address the just evolving environment of the challenges that we're all going through. There was a real need for that. So it seemed like a good time to finally put this in place.
David, we're putting on the screen a web address. So I'm urging everyone watching this interview to go investigate. Just listen to what we've said and go and check it out. It's very valuable. If you've never been to the Learning Guild's website, you really should. You can't be in learning without at least touching base regularly with the Learning Guild. So David Kelly, Executive Director, I'm really impressed with all the work that you've done, and long may it continue.
Thank you so much. We have a great team. I'm fortunate to be a part of it.
DPG's online courses are designed to fit around your life, so you can study anytime, anywhere. Get in touch now for more info.
Well, that's all over for another couple of weeks. You used to say for a month, but it's not. It's only 2 weeks, and we'll have another whole bunch of new items for you. Out of this week, Kate, what struck you? You talked to Danny about Venderly. So what is it about Venderly that you liked?
I just think it's it's a really interesting gap in our market, you know. And obviously from Fosway's point of view, we are doing things like our 9-grid analysis, and you know, we are talking to customers and we are processing, you know, mountains, thousands of lines of data to be able to put that view of the market out there. But what we don't do is make public the reviews and the comments that we get. That all stays very private, as the nature of our work. And I think the thing about Venderly is it's a bit like, what did Danny and Sam say? Something like, it's a bit like Trustpilot meets A and B. And I think to have that level of transparency and first-hand reviews available out there is going to be super valuable. And I could see people, you know, maybe looking at a 9-grid and thinking, oh, well, these all look interesting, and then going to Venderly and checking out the reviews. But it also, I think, is a great leveler in terms of, you know, the big organizations, the big training vendors and the big software vendors will have big budgets to spend on marketing and be able to get in front of people. But, you know, there are great, you know, coaches, facilitators, designers, developers out there who don't have those kind of budgets. But actually, if you went on somewhere and you can see that they've got great reviews and done great work, then all of a sudden, I think it's a great leveler for them as well. So I think it's positively disruptive.
I also think that it kind of levels the ground in another way, that if you've got a very, very good network, you tend to use the network. You say, hey, Kate, what do you think about this? Or did that work for you? Or do you know anyone who's using that? Yeah, I'm sure that's true. But to have someone who's new to the game or hasn't got that extensive network, but to get access to the views of an extensive network is really helpful. So it works for the vendor, it allows quality to rise to the top, and it works for the purchaser because they get a more objective account of whether something's going to work for them or not going to work, or where some of the weak spots are. So it is, I agree with you, Kate. I think it's a good, innovative idea, and we both wish them success with it. So
100%.
Good for you, Venderly. I hope you're a massive, massive hit over the coming years. So, Kate, just a few online events that are on. Oh, there's a lot, and I'll see if I can remember them. The first one is the Learning Solutions Conference, which is online from the Learning Guild, 3rd to the 14th of May. So it's essentially a 2-week event, so rather than compressed into 1 or 2 days. And then in the middle of that, on the 5th of May, there's the CIPD Inclusion and Diversity Conference. Guess what? Also online. And then the 17th to the 23rd of May, Learning at Work Week. So there'll be a lot of interesting stuff being highlighted and showcased during Learning at Work Week. And there's a website. If you put in Learning at Work Week, it will come popping straight into your browser. And then on the 15th to 17th of June, those CIPD people have got a Festival of Work online again. And finally, Learning Live in September the 8th and 9th, and the CIPD Annual Conference and Exhibition on the 3rd and 4th of November, which I think they are sincerely hoping will be in person. And so am I.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, and see you all at the end of the month.
Bye for now.